Labas vakaras visiems. Pirmiausiai Galerijos Vartai vardu ir patsai viešbučio vardu, kurie yra šito pokalbio ir šitos diskusijos rėmėjai, norime padėkoti visiems susirinkusiems į pokalbį, ką gali šiuolaikinis dizainas. Tiek įprasta sakyti menas. Mes kaip šiuolaikinio meno galerija iš tikrųjų tikime, kad tiek šis pokalbis, tiek tarptautinė šiuolaikinio dizaino paroda, kuri vyks po šito pokalbio ir atsidaro 6 valandą, yra iš tikrųjų išskirtinis ir didelis įvykis tiek mums kaip galerijai pristatančiai kūrėjus, tiek pačiam dizaineriams, tiek Lietuvos, Baltijos ir šalių kultūros ir meno laukui. Šiame pokalbyje kalbėsime apie tai, apie dizainą Lietuvos, Baltijos šalių kontekste, apie dizainą galerijos, aukciono, meno mugių pasaulyje. Tad norėčiau pristatyti šito pokalbio dalyvius. Pirmiausiai, and I will switch to English, I will start with Koen Kleijn. Actually, he's the reason why we organized this talk and conference. When we heard that he is coming to Lithuania, we thought that we cannot not organize this talk, and thank you for coming here. Thank you for being with us in this occasion. Koen Kleijn is art historian, he's a writer, journalist, and he's a former mentor of Marija, Puipaitė and Vytautas Gečas, creators of our exhibition at Galerija VARTAI. So I will present you right now. Vytautas and Marija, they are designers, curators. They finished Eindhoven Academy in conceptual design. Contextual design master degree. Thank you, Vytautas.
What's the difference?
Yes. And Mantas Lesauskas, he's associate professor at Vilnius Academy. He's designer as well of exclusive interiors and furniture. I believe we will start with Mantas. We have a free discussion, conversation among all the participants. I really recommend for all you to join, as this is something new for us. I believe it's something new for all of you, because we didn't have that kind of discussion in the gallery. It's not usual to have that kind of discussion in our cultural field here in Lithuania, so I believe it will be interesting. Thank you for coming and enjoy.
Labas vakaras. Hello everyone. So I think I will start our discussion with a short timeline, because I think it's important to settle like common ground if we are talking about such an infinite environment. So yeah, so this is my work from 2007, and this is from like recent years. I just showing it to maybe show how my own practice just shifted from, let's say, conceptual or contextual design towards maybe more decorative or like art decorative or decorative arts. Okay, so I would like to start this timeline with Memphis' first exhibition in Milan in 1981. It was like led this group by Ettore Sotsas with well-known young designers, and the main idea was to establish a new language, like anti-Bauhaus language, if we can say, where form, shape took expression. Yeah. So and the next event I would like to stress, it's like Prague exhibition in, or how they entered, let's say, Salone delle Mobiles in 1993, and they also had something against established rules, and it was like anti-luxury, anti-formal, yeah, and I think we will hear more about Dutch design in general, or Dutch tradition, and what influence it had on let's say today's collectible design, or like contextual design. It's like a lot of buzzwords, if I can say, yeah. So we have like few examples here. It's like Marcel Wander's chair, you know, like this macrame tapestry chair with epoxy, I think it was, yeah. And it had, it's not that we like or dislike, but just the influence it had on design field, I think is tremendous. Where's my water? This one. Because after Droch and like Martin Baas and others, I think designer studios became laboratories, and the way how they dealt with new materials and technologies actually like really corresponded with the end results, and it was not so much about how it looked, but like how it was made. Yeah, and in 2005 we have a new fair launched in Miami, Design Miami. At the time it was called Design .05, and it was like a sister event to Art Basel in Miami. And the next year, actually, it went to Basel as well. And we can say that this exhibition, or like objects exhibited there, is only for 1% of the world population. But still, it's rather interesting, I think, what this exhibition achieved and how it shaped our design field. In 2007, we have an explosion of collectible design in Mayfair, and in 2006, the Carpenters Workshop Gallery was opened, and their main focus was on design art, as they called, and still calling today. I think we will have some disagreements and agreements probably on this naming as well. No? Okay. And yeah, so basically the main idea Carpenters Workshop Gallery founders had, they approached the Frieze Art Fair in 2007, and they wanted to enter it with, I don't know, like with one of their artists. They had like Mark Quinn, Atelier van Lieshout, and others, and they are well known not as designers, but like as artists who produces some design as well. And Frieze said no. It was quite straightforward answer. And yeah, and at the same year they proposed for another two Frenchmen who ran PAD Fair in France, in Paris. Yeah, and it was also like, it's still every year it goes along with Frieze Art Fair. And yeah, in 2010 we have a world record set by Philips Auction House, and it's Mark Newson prototype of Lockheed lounge chair, sold for 1.4 million pounds. So we know that Mark Newson produced like 10 plus 4 artist proofs, and I think it was one prototype. So I think it's also a nice topic to discuss, like what does it mean in design world editions, and because we have most of our work is produced industrially, like yeah. So the first one was sold for 1.4 million, and in 2015, still retained Mark Newson retained at the same auction house this record. Another piece, let's say the same, or just it was not a prototype, sold for 2 million pounds. So yeah, so we have this. I think it's important in a design world to know those few things. Yeah, and in 2018 Another interesting contemporary design initiative, it still is like fair, really focused only on 21st century contemporary design, and this collectible fair is in Belgium, in Brussels. And yeah, and we have your fair today, an opening, not fair exhibition. It's so I think it's this kind of timeline. It's not that there's only most important events. It's just what yesterday I was thinking about, and I just put all of those things here. Yeah. So.
And if I may interrupt, we should mention that Marija, Puipaitė, and Vytautas Gečas project was accepted by a collectible fair, and we are planning to participate in it. So that's another important event for the design world, Lithuanian designers as well, coming this spring. So just adding the thought.
Yeah. So probably I will just give a microphone to our guest.
Thank you. For 10 years, I was involved with Design Academy Eindhoven. First of all, really as someone to help people write their thesis, because I'm an art historian and a journalist, and I know a thing or two about writing. I'm not a designer. I had to always explain to the students what my real capacity of designer was, and I would always tell them that when I was 13, I made a bird's house, and it was relatively easy to make the box and the slanted roof. But then the hole had to be made in it, and my dad came along. He drilled the first hole. He said, "No, you elaborate on that." And it was difficult to get it really round. But after a while, it was pretty round. But it was also by that time big enough to let the cat in. So this is the extent of my knowledge. Should you have any questions about that later on, then don't. So on the basis of that, I would like to tell you a little bit about this process that we went through in Eindhoven at this school, the things I learned there and the things that they probably learned, being my mentees. And I gave a lecture here and there about it, and to be extra pedantic and important, I always throw in a bit of poetry or a Greek philosopher. So here you go. I would like to talk to you about what contemporary design can do, or have you ever heard of Diogenes? Also known as Diogenes the Cynic. First of all, this title, What Contemporary Design Can Do, is a slight play on another conference that's held annually in Amsterdam, What Design Can Do. And apparently this conference talks about contemporary design, not about older stuff, because contemporary design apparently is something else other than design. Basically, I think we're avoiding a trade war or a copyright issue here. And here's my friend who would like to introduce Diogenes of Sinope. You've probably heard of him. He's the great stand-up philosopher of the Hellenistic time, lived in a barrel in the streets, practiced poverty, and was known later on as a cynic. And before you think that I'm a cynic too, let me outline the gentleman on the right, the dogs. Cynic comes from the Greek word for dog. And Diogenes felt that philosophers and dogs were the most useful entities in society, but didn't always get the reward they needed. And he also referred to these dogs especially because they have a certain outlook on life, which he shared being on the ground. Pictures like these are a dime a dozen. Diogenes is always shown in his barrel where he's slept and lighting a lantern in the middle of the day to look for a human being. There's plenty of these little stories. Never actually wrote anything himself. So let me talk to you about design, as most people, first of all, understand it. After Mantas' brilliant introduction, you understand that there was a beginning point of this where people think, well, designers make things and they're useful things, and there are things you can understand. And I can make a whole list of them of things that you understand, right? And they're really always the same. There have been some innovations here and there and things like, but essentially a bicycle is still a bicycle, a fork is still a fork, and the little wooden things to stir your coffee with are always the same little wooden things to stir your coffee with. Speedo, swim trunks are always the same because your hips and your bottom are the same, so there's really no, you can change the color a bit in the fabric, but really they will always look like this. And this perhaps is the most perfect example. A syringe is something you use to put stuff in your body using your thumb and two fingers, and there really isn't any way you can improve on this. This has been working for I don't know, for 400 years. Painful. And it gets even more fundamental than that. This is a cup. This is a plastic cup that you'll find everywhere in the world. It's a perfect object. It's very light. It can take hot liquids and cold liquids. You can use it in machines. You can use it at home. It's degradable if it's made well. There you go. So ask anybody what a cup is, and you end up with talking about perfect archetypes. And some of them are so strong that if you talk to a beginning designer and you say, make a cup, this is the first thing they have in their mind, even if they wouldn't want to, if they had something else. This is a perfect archetype too. I always like to introduce the AK-47 because it is a perfect designed object. And it's sometimes introduced into exhibitions as more or less in a jokey way, as saying, oh, the arms industry is also part of the design world. In fact, as the great Roman architect Vitruvius said, Mars is the father of architecture. So the warfare industry is really the father of a lot of design innovation. I said, you know, you could take the word cynic here, but it's actually a dog's view on how design works in the world. Some of these things are so archetypical that they live on long after they don't exist anymore. This traffic sign is actually still in use in the Netherlands for a railway crossing, although very few people younger than me have ever actually seen a steam train. But still, if you say the word train, this is the first thing that comes to mind, apparently. Right, now, if you take these things as your basic standpoint and you want to become a designer, you go to design school, then you go into this trajectory of working with these kinds of formats, design for perfection, design for profit, and design for pleasure, and you design yourself and everybody else into paradise, and there it is. This is the sublime collection of objects that everybody loves, and really fit. It's amazing how successful it is all around the world. I've been to Lithuania quite a few times, and I noticed when renting an Airbnb room that IKEA had arrived here, because there it was, the bedspreads and the furniture and the so there you are. Now, we could stop it here and say, if this is the design trajectory that you like to do, there's hundreds of schools around the world that will help you become a successful designer, create for perfection, for pleasure, for the world, and for profit. But let's talk then about a different approach, say contemporary design 2.0. 2.0, all right, back to Diogenes, who I brought along. Probably know these stories about him. One of the stories is that he sat in his barrel and Alexander the Great came to visit and said, after a while, what can I do for you? What would you like me to give you? And he just said, move away a bit, because you're in the sun. It's the one thing you can't give me. You know, he's the great debunker of things, and took this debunking quite far, and this is the best example of it. He had a cup to drink from, and then saw this. He saw a girl drink from her hands at the fountain, and then famously threw away his cup. You don't actually need a cup if you can drink from your hands. And this is kind of, in a way, an essence of this change in design thinking that Mantas just mentioned came with Dutch design. I'll talk a bit about Dutch design itself, but this is really the essence of this question. Does the world really need another chair? You could work for IKEA, but you could also not work for them. If you don't work for them, you say, why would you make another chair, or a cup, or a conveyor belt, or a cruise missile, or anything beginning with a C? And if you don't really need another chair, does the world really need another designer? Because these things are here, and you can just use them again. And people, by the way, the people who use objects, are usually fairly competent at making their own stuff and really doing things that they want. And we'll show you a chair from a series of pictures about China, Chinese chairs. These are made by, what's his name again? I didn't write it down. Oh, here it is. Michael Wolff, Baster chairs. And when you look at these are things to sit upon, adapted in public by people in China who work in a market or and they're brilliant. And you don't really need a designer for this. You just need bits and pieces and some glue, maybe and a bit of rope. And you can set, you don't really need all this industry. You certainly don't need a designer to think of this. And it's this, basically this questioning, it's very elementary questioning, like, does the world really need another chair? And what if people are very happy to sit like this? Why should we go through all the trouble of introducing a whole new series and making them very expensive and presenting them in Milan or in Rome or anywhere else? When you can do just this, you take a piece of wood and you sit on it. It's that bit of thinking that I think infuses this school that we went through, this Design Academy Eindhoven, and it came about in rather a special way. It has a longer history. The word Dutch design was minted in 1972 already, but Design Academy Eindhoven functions as Design Academy Eindhoven since 1997. It's an older school. It was originally the School for Industrial Design for Philips, which was then the Netherlands' largest producer of household electronic appliances. They invented the CD, they were very proud to say that. But they had lots of irons and toasters and things, and therefore created a school where these things had to be designed. But here it is, it's huge. Should you ever go to Dutch Design Week, it all takes place at this area, but this was the great factory. Eindhoven, the city, was dominated by this. Thousands of people worked there. You were set for life if your dad worked for Philips. But since the 80s and 90s, they faced all this competition from Asia and others, and the rest of Europe. Large tracts of their company went out of business, and so the school was cut loose from its relationship with this industry, and became rather a hit school, where under Lee Edelkoort, you showed her picture, things took on an entirely different trajectory, and with this, say, my Diogenes idea of why should you really design another chair, students embarked on really fundamental research into what design could be, what materials could be, and especially how designed objects could relate to the wider world. There's a few characteristics you could remember of later on. First of all, these Dutch designers from the late 90s were independent from industry, as I said. They were focused on doing elementary research. They were focused on their process rather than on their product. And they valued the individual input, where usually, as Mantas already hinted at, people were either an artist or a designer. You were either a modest tinkerer and a craftsman, or you were a grand visionary to make art. These things are now blended. You could be anything you liked, and these individual concepts, these individual inputs were valued. And also, Dutch design goes back to basics, to very simple things. These are 3 chairs made by Jürgen Bij. I'll show you the expensive version of it. But really, this is something I think that Diogenes would have approved of. You know, you don't really need a chair if you already have the tree. You just need something for your back. Talk about collectibles. These things are now in the hundreds of thousands, and they're in the MoMA. But to start with, the thinking is really quite modest and quite down to earth. Another example, quite well known, of this elementary research is, what if you had a chair and you burnt it partially, and then stopped this charring, and then took the chair out and you fuse it with epoxy and you can sit on it again. It was once a famous chair, but now it's a burnt chair and you can still sit on it. I'll come to one of the disadvantages of this approach, because there's a lot of vanity in it, but still, these are things that were eye-openers to this whole generation of younger designers. They think, can you do this? And some of the students I encountered who played on with this. This is a Finnish designer who took a regular chair and a regular cupboard and welded this little fabric of rings over it, and then burnt away the original chair, and so you have sort of a memory of it. And I mentioned research. Some of these projects were sort of started from a more general idea, and in his case, his grandmother with Alzheimer's. How would she relate to objects that she couldn't really identify anymore, and how could you visualize such a thing, or the actual function or the actual substance of an object gradually fades from view. You can't sit on them, but they're bloody expensive if you want one. And this perhaps is one of the most elementary of the elementary projects. Lucas Munoz, who will be in the show later on, and this is his rock chair, starting with a very Diogenes-like assumption that the very first thing that human beings ever sat on was a rock. So they picked some rocks and then turned them back into chairs. Again, these are little games basically you can play. They are serious. You know, you could say, I'll show you some more of these projects where you would, and especially your mother and your grandmother would say, what the devil do these people think they're doing? You can't even sit on it. And there is an element. There is certainly an element of Dada. There is certainly an element of letting go. But that's all part of this process of arriving at something else. Fun could be part of it. Vanity too. It's not that I'm mad, Diogenes said, it's just that my head is different from yours. Say that to your teacher next time you talk to him. All right, here's a few of these mad projects that I always remember. One is the White Sheet Black Dream. This is a French student whose whole project is about the idea of what it would be like if you wanted to become a sheep. I made a lovely film about it where a happily married man secretly starts eating grass and sleeping in wool and eventually runs away from his girlfriend. It turns out to be really about the movie rather than the project, but he did make a whole set of objects that could help you get into the feeling of being a sheep, so being on your knees and crawling through wool. Some of them are more sort of a global perspective. This is a Chinese student, Jinghe, who made this elaborate vase of contemporary objects, which looks like 17th century Dutch Delft tulip vases, these pagoda-like shapes. And these pagoda-like shapes, of course, were derived from original Chinese shapes. So this is a fine example of a student investing in how globalization works and how objects move through the world. This is another influence. This made all the front pages because it's a very good photograph. But Yifei Chen gathered her tears and turned them into bullets. She comes from a country where you're not supposed to show your emotions. So there's a clever design work here in how you make a gun that catches your tears, but the actual story, of course, has very little to do with reality. And other things are more into process. Sigve Knudsen was here a few years ago with a very simple idea. He could make drawings. How can you directly translate them into design without going to a workshop or talking to a craftsman? Came up with all these weird little funny structures. And another project that was influenced by local culture. Boro Hong is from South Korea. South Korea is very big on plastic surgery. If you're not pretty, you can't be in South Korea. And she applied the same idea to ugly furniture and performed cosmetic surgery on ugly chairs, turning them into Ray Eames chairs and giving them a boost and making them. And in such a way, it's just basically giving a commentary on the culture of her home nation. Now, there are serious issues, of course, if you're a designer. Quickly, glass of water. And these are, of course, also addressed in a school like Eindhoven and are, of course, as Mantas said, prevalent in any kind of design culture throughout the world. How do you as a designer relate to the market? Your kids need to eat, so some bread has to come on the table. So eventually you'll have to invest or relate to a capitalist structure. How do you really safeguard your sense of creativity? How do you safeguard your property rights on products that you make? How do you address the real needs of people? You know, you can design curtains for IKEA till the cows come home, but is that really what people need? And how do you assess what people really need? And second thing is skills and processes that you're used to. How important are they really? Why should you continue to make things in plastics? Because they're convenient or because you're good at them? Couldn't you do the same thing with seaweed or something else that's lying around uselessly, like salt in the desert, like there is in Canada? And of course, there's the big question that everybody faces now, sustainability. What do you do with limited resources? Is it really interesting enough to make something out of mother of pearl or whalebone, that kind of thing? All right. Just to look back, these ideas were introduced into Lithuania a few times when Vytautas and Marija and I organized a few summer schools. I'll show you quickly pictures of them, where we basically had Lithuanian students clash with students from Eindhoven, put them in a strange environment, like the art colony in Nida, and perform this kind of elementary thinking in a pressure cooker of a week, and then very quickly make an exhibition. And surprisingly, so for instance, they went to very well-known and usually fairly trivial locations. This is the local museum at Nida, which is all devoted to what people did there in the horrible days when you still ate crows or raw fish or that kind of thing. But there's a kind of skill involved in it. And looking at it, some of these students, even Lithuanian students, recognize that for the first time. So well, perhaps we could pick up on this. There's just some original shapes that you may have passed and never really noticed. There are some local resources that pine needles that you've never thought of using, perhaps, as a designer. So we experimented very quickly, and even sort of shapes that we thought funny, but you probably never really noticed. Anyway, these led to some very quirky projects, like using local bath necessities to defend against the enemy, or using MDF and putting it in the sea, which makes the lakes swell up and then you paint them. Here you go, you use local things that you use for the beach to drive away the Russians who were down the beach somewhere. And then we put together a very quick exhibition where everybody came to see it. There was free beer, so there was a large attendance. I remember somebody recognized the director of design there on the left. Moses. Did the same again 2 years later in a building near the railway station with even more elaborate and very poetic projects. Now, that's all great fun. Right, so you want to rush off to this school because you can be as hip as they are, and it'll all be fun. You can basically do whatever you like, and you can get very famous with it and make a lot of money with it. It'll be great. Now let's go back to the dogs then, right? To the cynic. I'll take that role. Not everything here is perfect, of course. There are some pitfalls, and these are some things that when you're looking at this kind of quirky design that I think you'll see later on in the gallery, you might have in the back of your mind. Not to be a cynic, but just a critic. Right? Technology is one. Economics, and especially the scale of economics is important. And there are certain things like vanity and blinkered idealism. I'll just take on this cynic role and just talk about a few of them. This one you may know, it's 2006, a famous chair by Joris Laarman, also in the Museum of Modern Art in New York. And it's constructed, as you can see, as a natural growth of bone. Your bone structure is very efficient. It catches your stress or does the work where it needs to be done. So there's very little superfluous in it, which is a really good idea if you want to make a chair and you want to save on using aluminum. But Laarman developed this whole concept with the car manufacturers at Audi, because they, of course, are very keen on saving on aluminium in making their engines, and they developed this kind of thinking of a natural organic growth to catch the stresses in an engine block. So Laarman, I remember saying, if you want to do stuff, really get to grips with the technology of things. The market may be dangerous, but they actually know stuff. You really get to know them. And there's a few projects where this sort of, doesn't work that well. Boyan Slot, a few years ago, here he is, young guy, young designer, good hair, became instantly famous for a project to clean up the oceans. It's called Ocean Cleanup, and there we go. He got loads of funding, and it's a very elaborate system of a very long float, really, that gathers up plastic. And of course this has startup problems, but eventually it's put into practice, and lo and behold, it does gather plastics. It's great. It also, however, carries every living organism that swims on the surface. Fish, jellyfish, turtles, tortoises, not the stuff you want in there. And it's not so easy to get a Coca-Cola bottle separated from a turtle in the middle of the ocean. So some more profound thinking perhaps could have gone into this before you got the ship and the Pacific at your gift. Here's another one, a particular pet peeve of mine. Dave Hucken's Precious Plastic won all the prizes at Design Academy Eindhoven. You remember the Precious Plastic, very simple. It's got a huge website. Recycled plastic is easy, and you can start collaborating and boost plastic recycling. You just gather a lot of plastics. You can build the recycle instruments yourself. It's very, very simple. You get a crusher, you throw plastic in it, it comes out as little pellets. You melt the pellets, and you put them in a shape, and bang, you've got a new bottle. And if you're dumb, you can just download all these tutorials and Workspace, etc., and call them. And lo and behold, there's thousands of people across the planet who are doing this. I showed this to a friend who said, I had a factory like that 20 years ago. We recycle plastic all the time. And we make stuff, these little piles that you use in the street for it. Besides, he said, you can't just throw any kind of plastic together. The PET bottles are okay, but any other kind of plastic you mix with it degrades the plastic, and really, you can't do shit with it. Also, he says, you want to be careful. This is very toxic. It's very pollutant. You just don't want to just melt plastic in your face. Huckins never thought of that. So he went off to Africa with his industry and thought it'd be a good idea if the poor people of Kenya would bring their plastic bottles and he would grind them up. And the poor people of Kenya said, we have better things to do than this. And found out, to his disgrace, I suppose, that he was another sort of friendly white colonialist moving to Africa to tell the poor people there how they should handle their garbage. So, is that cynical enough for you? Right, thank you. Now, I haven't been to the exhibition yet, so I don't know what you'll see there, but I'm pretty sure that since all but one of the people who present there have been to Eindhoven, that some of these cynical safeguards might help you establish what that is. But I guess the most important thing is, especially perhaps in the Lithuanian context of design, that a good idea is never wasted and may very well lead to something else that you never thought about. Right. Now, We will be talking about this in a minute. Thank you for your attention. Right, we'll sit here. This is a big room. Thank you. Well, Vytautas and Marija, is this really the story of Eindhoven as you know it, or?
Yes, this is work.
Yeah.
Partly. I was absolutely the same opinion about the last project immediately once I saw it. That was really weird. And then, yeah, the same person, I remember, he made another project with the phone where you can make it kind of your own. Like you have the bag, the phone, and you can put.
He made a phone bit similar to Lego.
Yeah.
So all the little bits of your phone that stopped working, you could just pluck off and replace. That was
Yeah,
the
you
idea.
can do it the way you want to do it. If you take more pictures, and both of the projects they didn't work in the end. I mean, this one is still there. Anyway, but I think maybe my impression after once, maybe in the second year, I think so. So masters 2 year, second year, that's the final year. And when I came to Design Mecca. That was like the best school for me in the world, since I discovered it during the bachelor by student projects. And then I thought, first of all, that I'm coming to very, very, very conceptual design school. Like I don't have to do anything except like to sit down, write, like analyze my context, the chosen topic, and then come to conclusions. Like have this perfectly done idea and then go materialize it, and it's going to be the greatest design ever. And apparently it wasn't. There were so many different approaches. And maybe another thing that kind of shocked me in a good way, that especially once I saw maybe the very first graduation show, and I had enough time to go around and to explore all of them and get to know the people. Maybe I already knew some of the people that were behind the projects. It was really, really very different approaches towards design. So you have something from very conceptual to very traditional to industrial design, etc., etc., etc. And I think that school, although you kind of know the school from projects like this, at least some of them, but I think that's the way the school makes their own portfolio. Like in the end, you have like, I don't know, 5.
Let me cut you off here then, because that's a question for Mantas, I think. The school makes its portfolio. The school is famous for having these projects. How does the market, the people that you show, the people that buy chairs for 2 million, how do they look at that?
I think there is some fairs that is built on that, and some sales and some auction houses just work on that, and let's say okay, the same Carpenters Workshop Gallery. I think their main art designers are from Eindhoven Design Academy. So I think we still have to wait maybe 10 years for all the works to surface auction houses, because now we have what. Like Ronarad, he was like making his limited editions in the 80s. We have Zaha Hadid and like ours. So probably I think it's still we will see more of those in a decade, I suppose. But I think it's if I understand you correctly, I think it's the approach of Design in Holland, or the students and professors were maybe not too satisfied to supply collectible design market with with the limited edition pieces and so on. So they want the market to catch up, but I think it's there lies a problem, because it's just too.
But surely this will always be a small market, maybe a niche market.
I don't know. I don't know. When we see how prices went up, let's say in contemporary art market, so some of the younger collectors, as they say, they moved on. Like as maybe 30 years ago they moved on from impressionism to I don't know, like modernism in fine arts.
Another question, Marija, because you went to this school too, and now you're here, and you've not moved to New York or London. how does this design thinking land in Lithuania? Do you think you people really have a kind of influence here? You were not the only two, of course, but
Well, I would like to add a bit what we were talking before. I think it depends what kind of approach you have. Either you have more social orientated improvement approach, or you're interested in creativity and exploring your own themes, let's say. So I guess that's why you have so many different projects. Well, we both graduated from contextual design, that is mostly known, that is like a, like students tend to do some collectible pieces, let's say, more. And thinking about Lithuanian context, I don't know. Well, we teach, both of us, so...
And you teach at the academy, or?
I will.
Not yet.
Not yet, I will, from the next semester. But we were teaching, and Vytautas is still teaching in Design College and in Vilnius Technical University as well. So we are making influence in some way. But also, yesterday we were discussing about whole Lithuanian education and design, and I think it is changing in a good way. And what we were missing the most is like this maker's culture, because we still kind of imagine that the main work that designer does is just, in front of your computer. You get some brilliant ideas, so you make technical drawings, and then someone does it for you.
Yes.
So this way it doesn't work. As you said, we don't need no more chairs, no more, I don't know, like ordinary
Any more
things.
ideas?
Like either we need some inventions or improvements or something really creative for your imagination to fulfill your, I don't know.
Another question then. When I was here 10 years ago, a gallery opened, Tulips and Roses, for conceptual design, and then it closed again. What's the situation now?
Well, we have.
Are there places where you can sell your stuff?
It's very different for the art market and design market, I guess. What can you say? Thank you.
If I understand the question correctly, well, this is the reason why we're here. Like we're here today. The VARTAI, the gallery, approached us and said, let's do something, and can you offer us something? So I think that's a change. I was thinking about that question a few days ago, and I thought another thing that happened was also last year, and a national art gallery, which is a national institution, they made an exhibition. It was very much connected to Lithuania being 100 years old, and it was 100 years of design. So the curatorial part was done, from the hierarchy of time. And it was a really lovely exhibition, and we were there as well. And so it kind of showed us, let's say, that kind of trying to make like a really broad approach towards design and Lithuanian design. And I hope for that this is going to be like a snowball going down the mountain. And after 1 year, here we are today. And
So things are picking up, you might say.
Yeah, I mean, fingers crossed. Yeah.
Because one of the problems usually is that funding and education is really based on traditional divisions, traditional ideas. Funding goes to the arts and to design, maybe a little bit to interdisciplinary problems. How do you address that problem here? Is that an issue here?
Well, money is always the issue,
Yes.
of course. But another thing that I think maybe changed in the last year is that Lithuania established Lithuanian Design Council. I somehow ended up being part of it, and so we're a little bit closer to ministry and actually the minister, and then you get a little bit closer to how the policy should be built up, and then where should we go, and following that, probably that's how we choose where the money goes as well. So it is definitely a problem. Everybody, all the sides decide, let's say, the way we see design, decide the designers that see it from more commercial point of view or social design. Everybody is saying that we need a little bit more, not even the money, but just simply recognition and understanding what we do and why. And so I don't know. It's hard to say. The money is always the problem. There are a lot. Well, there are some funding. I mean, even our projects that we did before, we got a good funding. But I think finally we got into a point where we have a council that will address the ministry, both economic ministry and cultural ministry, and help them out to to understand how it works, how design works.
Yes, and again, it's quite important that a private gallery like VARTAI really also invests in this and shows this as something worthwhile. You mean, also been stepping away from this division with only doing fine arts. Right, does anybody have a question? You have to sing for your supper, all right? You can't just sit here and say, no, please. I know you're all shy, but still. No? Then we're abundantly clear. I have another question. One thing that struck me when we did these projects was, contrary to what you say basically, is that there was actually a lot of skill and a fairly good connection between Lithuanian students and, say, materials that were prevalent in this country, but wood to begin with, etc. And do you find it possible to connect to that, to say this more traditional awareness of these skills that are already there?
If I can add that, probably it's, even yesterday I was thinking like, what is the reason? And in your email we also, like, you raised a question like about creativity of like Lithuanian students and designers in general, and I was like thinking that it's still, I think the relation can be denied with occupation, you know, like, and I mean the lack of support for sophisticated crafts, not only I don't know, like wood. Yeah. So basically, we don't have foundries and like normal foundries with, and even technology. You know, like if we talk about Dutch design, so it's not about only craft. It's still, you know, Delft University and others, and like Audi, as you mentioned. So basically, I think there is some parts missing, and the funding is not the problem, because in this context, I think design is in a good position because it has two pockets. You know, like one is from like traditional industrial design part where you can go to one ministry, and another one is like you can go to the, I don't know, to the cultural part and say that, oh, you see, we do something more or less artistic. So yeah, so I think money is not the problem here. I think the infrastructure and the tradition, or what lack of tradition in crafts, sophisticated crafts, if I can call them that, we have. So, yeah.
Also, another problem is that we started to speak about Lithuanian history of design quite recently. It was somehow hidden in a way, I guess, because of the political reasons that, is it our history in a way? But still, at those times, people made brilliant objects, and we still have to start appreciating it, and we are missing this ground, you know? Like, we are trying to build something completely new. We look at Scandinavians, and like basically we think that the only good taste and good design comes from Scandinavia somehow, because
That's a good point. I remember there was a similar process within the arts, right? I remember the films by Gečas about Soviet sculptors who worked in this country who were actually good sculptors, but all their statues are gone. So yes, there is a longer tradition that you need to delve into, right? Also part of this research process, I should think. Right? Is anybody brave enough to ask a question now? That's another thing I remember. We were all so shy always. Nobody sits in the front. Yes, very good.
So maybe for
Bring a microphone over to you.
have a question, but maybe it's more for the Galerija VARTAI. How they're planning navigating design and fine arts, if there's a plan.
Yeah. So basically this year we are starting with the exhibition, and it will be the series of exhibition that we are planning to have. Right now we are working like a gallery presenting contemporary art. So we have 5-6 contemporary art exhibitions per year. For the next year we're planning again to have 1 contemporary art exhibition. So looking to overall sum of the exhibition that we have, it will be 1 design exhibition per year. Talking about art fairs, as we kind of notice the need for the designers to step into this position and present them internationally. Because what we are lacking here in Lithuania and what we are lacking in the Baltics, that we do not have professional institutions who would bring and present designers in the international design fairs. So what we are planning to do, we are also planning to apply to design fairs and to present the design works and Lithuanian contemporary designers over there. So it will be 1 or 2 design fairs per year as well. Yeah, so that's the plan for now, and we will see how it changes, because it's new for us as well. This is totally new adventure, or how you call it, but
Can I ask you, what's really new about it then? I mean,
yeah, for
you
us,
pack things, you go to a fair, you sell them.
yeah, it's a little bit different project, because like contemporary art or art itself is more for looking, and right now we kind of educated the audience about contemporary art. What we have to do right now, we have to educate the audience about contemporary design.
That's what you're here for. You're being educated.
So this is a process, to be honest, the process to talk to the collectors, the process to groom the collectors, to introduce them to contemporary design as a collectible pieces, and with different designers from the art objects. It's the editions and the prices differs based on the edition. Maybe we can talk about that among the designers. That's really.
So everything we'll see in the show is for sale.
Yes,
Yeah.
Very good.
that is correct. I don't know if I answered the question, but that will be the plan for now and for the next year, 2 design fairs and 1 contemporary design exhibition next December as well.
Marija.
No, I just found it quite funny. I was watching yesterday's news, and there was a short reportage about the installation of the whole exhibition, and yeah, also the question how we should define this kind of design. Is it really a contemporary design? Is it a conceptual design? I don't know. Well, but the journalist said that basically it's conceptual design, and the other phrase was that it's not, it's hardly applied in our domestic environment. And I thought,
Yeah, that
damn
was-
it, we tried to explain it and it didn't work. No, of course, it's not for your 2 rooms apartment in Fabijoniškės, but I mean, you really can dream about it, and the way also what kind of pleasure as curators we had together with Vytautas. Like we were joking, it's as if choosing furniture for your living room with unlimited budget. We had so much fun. No, but like really you
could make anything.
Can I add?
Yes, of course.
Afterwards, what we discussed, the way of that specific sentence, it was not only the way we talked or what we present, what you will see later on today, but it's the way I think the culture is approached in general, and everything which is what is contemporary culture is not for you. It's there far away, extremely expensive. You don't get it, and this is. That's the thing. That's the thing that we wouldn't. That's not what we want to do. That's not what we're doing. That's not what we're saying. I mean, the price is one thing. It not necessarily has to be that wall in between you understanding. And I think coming back to, I think we can briefly explain or tell a story of the exhibition. What we're presenting today, what you will see afterwards. That's the thing, even to the level of the exhibition of the design, we kind of wanted to bring a little bit of domestic living into actual exhibition, just to show that it's closer than you think, and it is a little bit more simple, and I think you should enjoy it a little bit more. And yeah, don't build that, you know, like big gap in between. And yeah.
Right, let it happen to you. Very good. Right, no further questions? Well then, thank you very much for your attention. We now have to hurry to the gallery. There's free beer for, no, I don't know.
Yes, there will be.
Again, thank you very much. Thank you for your hospitality here. Thank you for my guests, or rather my hosts. See you all later. We'll be happy to chat with you in the gallery too.
Thank you.
Yes.